We all know the story of Frankenstein, right? Well, if you don't, originally Frankenstein was a novel written by Mary Shelley that published in 1818, over 200 years ago. The story was about Dr. Victor Frankenstein, a scientist who creates a human-like monster through some shady, unchecked experimentation. The monster is cunning and intelligent, but also hideous and frightful. To make a long story short, the two struggle to coexist through emotions of rejection, bitterness, regret, and revenge. It's pretty awesome. Oftentimes people will refer to the creature as Frankenstein, but the creature never really had a proper name outside of just referring to it as monster or creature. The game actually gets it wrong, as the manual erroneously refers to the monster as Frankenstein over and over. But it does get old saying Frankenstein's monster again and again, so I'm just going to call the monster Daryl for the rest of this video. The NES game story serves as a makeshift sequel to the Frankenstein story, where the creature returns, per the title, Frankenstein, the Monster Returns, or rather, Frankenstein, the Return of Daryl. What does Daryl return to do, and how does this game play? Well, let's see what's up. As the story goes here, Daryl's tombstone is struck by lightning and he rises from the dead, raises an army via magic, destroys a bunch of villages, and takes a woman named Emily hostage. No bueno. This monster can get a lot done, and I admire it. But your job as just a lowly villager is to defeat the once believed to be mythical monsters in Daryl's army, defeat Daryl himself, and rescue Emily. As you play, you'll come up against monsters that increase in viciousness as you go. You'll go one-on-one against werewolves, Dracula, floating hands and heads, and giant lightning-wielding knights. That's probably the neatest thing about the game, is the variety in the enemies and mini-bosses. There are 4 total stages, which seems like too few, but trust me, you won't want more. And each stage has its own regular enemies that aren't bosses. That is a plus for variety. Your weapon can upgrade too by finding swords, clubs, or maces to increase your attack. You can also find these red balls that give your weapon a projectile, which definitely comes in handy so you can keep your distance from certain enemies. You only get 3 lives, but you can pick up magic that can refill your life meter as you go. If you do die 3 times, you're given a password, which is cool, but you have to enter it to continue. You have to go enter the password each time. Ugh. So always write it down. Always, no matter what. And that's just one of the frustrations in the game. There's an infamous sequence early where, after defeating the Grim Reaper, you can be scooped up and flown back to the beginning of the stage by this pterodactyl thing if you don't kill it first. And it's not that it's hard to kill, it's just hard to hit because it swoops in so fast. And this happens early, as if the game is letting you know off the bat that it doesn't really care what you think. If it senses you're starting to have a good time, it's going to do what it can to put a stop to that. Other annoying parts of the game include times where enemies just fly out of nowhere, or your hits don't register, or the enemy just refuses to do anything except stare you down and dare you to move, or you miss a floating platform and fall into water, have to square off against Aquaman in a fight that somehow makes you feel like you're drowning in your own recliner because everything moves so slow and no amount of panicked button presses seem to register what you want it to. So that's not to say the game isn't at all beatable, it is, but how bad do you want it? You'll have to suffer through a game that lacks polish and requires a lot of trial and error, mostly error, specifically on the latter stages to see progress. The final battle with Daryl is one heck of a doozy that will take a few tries to master, which means replaying the last level a ton of times. Graphically, the game is okay. I'm a fan of monsters and the mythos incorporated in the game, so werewolves, medusas, floating eyeballs, and all that stuff appeal to me. The cutscenes are well done, though it's mainly just text. The sound design is passable, but truthfully, it could all be a little better. When you compare it to games that clearly inspired it, most obviously Castlevania, it's not even close. If you're looking for a spooky but frustrating monster-filled challenge, Frankenstein the Monster Returns may work for you, but if you're looking for something more palatable, with more polish, and generally more fun, you could probably do better than this one. Frankenstein the Monster Returns on the NES was an exclusive to the system, and no other ports or sequels followed it. There were other games back in the day that did feature Frankenstein or his monster. There's Frankenstein's Monster on the Atari 2600. It's a platformer where you must make your way through Dr. Frankenstein's castle to stop the creation of the monster. It's decent. There's a text-based adventure that released on Amstrad CPC, Commodore 64, and ZX Spectrum simply titled Frankenstein. It's not really my speed, but apparently people dig it. You essentially have to track down the escaped monster and kill him. Lastly, there is Mary Shelley's Frankenstein that released on the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis in 1994. That game is a much deeper experience than the rest talked about here, but really amounts to a lackluster action platformer that ranks low on the fun dial. Well, that does it for Frankenstein: The Monster Returns on NES. Just remember, Frankenstein's monster's name is Daryl, and thanks for watching.